These videos will make you question everything. So remember, this is for entertainment purposes only. Let's check it out.
As we begin to explore the unsolved, one should be prepared to swim through the realms of the criminal, the uncharted, and the paranormal. Cryptic disappearances and strange phenomena may find their solutions in the most unexpected ways. Number 10. The Spanish flu refers to a pandemic that plagued the Earth from 1918 to 1920. It was found to be the worst pandemic in world history at the time. The virus had infected around 500 million people worldwide and had taken the lives of 50 million of them. 675,000 of those losses were reported in the United States alone. The disease was caused by a new strain of the influenza virus that had been spread by troops during the First World War. While this flu had spread throughout Europe during this time, news reports from Spain had not been subject to censorship, and so the term Spanish flu became a common phrase. There had been no vaccines or treatments for this virus, which had caused social disruption throughout schools, churches, and businesses, which were forced to close. Individuals had to wear masks to protect them from this virus until it came to an end in March of 1920.
Listening to this has me replaying 2020 all over again in my head, bro. Like, do y'all realize, just stop and think, you realize what we went through? It's crazy.
Influenza refers to a virus that attacks the respiratory system. It's known to be highly contagious through the infected person sneezing, coughing, or droplets that travel through the air. Flu outbreaks are known to happen each year, with varying levels of severity, and on what type of virus is spreading. Flu viruses are known to rapidly mutate as well. The Spanish flu is characterized by chills, fever, and fatigue during the first wave of infections. But by the second wave, victims would develop more severe symptoms, which included their skin turning blue and their lungs filling with fluid. The mystery is, though, where did the Spanish flu come from? This question has confounded scientists for almost a century, but through a recent study in the PNAS, or Proceeding of the National Academy of Sciences, a fresh answer was put forth to one of medical science's enduring mysteries. Researchers had been led by Michael Warraby, who was from the University of Arizona, where they would reconstruct the origins of the 1918 pandemic. They were able to conclude that the pathogen had come from an existing H1 flu virus that had come from genetic material from the bird flu virus. This new H1N1 virus had the ability to evade immune systems, hence why it infected over a quarter of the United States citizens. But it had been those aged between 20 and 40 years old that perished during this time. Based on Warby's study, it suggested that the unusual mortality rate was because of prior immunity or lack thereof. Viruses constantly change and evolve, which is why there's no lifelong vaccine for it. Flu viruses are made from two parts, HA proteins and NA proteins. It's said that the HA protein...
The fact that they change so much, there's no way for us to prepare. That's the crazy part to me. You know what I mean? It's nothing we can do. We have to wait till it presents itself, just randomly, spontaneously just shows up and happens, and then we have to figure it out then while we're losing people.
Protein drives our immune system's response. It was found in the team's research that the people who were born between 1880 and 1900 were the generation that had been hit the hardest by the Spanish flu. These individuals had also been exposed to H3N8 during their childhood when it circulated in 1889. They had not been exposed, however, to an H1 virus and therefore had no antibodies to fight off this new virus. Warraby reconstructed the genetic origins of the Spanish flu and found that an H1N1 flu virus had been circulating a few years prior to the outbreak. Flu strikes commonly during childhood, which means that those who were born after 1900 would have had previous exposure to an H1N1 flu virus, which additionally offered some protection against the mutated strain, which was found to be a type of bird flu. Those who had been born prior to 1880 were exposed most likely to the H1N8 flu virus that had been circulating when they were young. In both the very young and old, having exposure to H1 viruses had given them some protection from the new strain, as compared to those who had never been infected by the H1 strain. This would explain the unusual mortality rate during the pandemic. 2 avian flus, the H5N1 and the H7N9, have been periodically jumping the species barrier and have been infecting people. Many individuals had lost their lives during the 1918 pandemic, and at the time it was not widely understood. The mystery of what caused such an outbreak has confused scientists in the medical field. Thanks to
Look at this right here. And then they're all in the room together. So it's just jumping from person to person. You might shake it off one day or be getting better, and then somebody new get put in this room and it jump back on you. Like this photo right here alone, man, is just like scary. I don't know if y'all remember that skit where Country Wayne was just walking around and with the suit on, the virus suit on, and he was just touching people. This is what it makes me think of, this situation here.
The team of researchers, it was not long before the origins of the Spanish flu was discovered. Perhaps with further research, the medical field may be able to find a solution to such problems that may unfold in the future.
Scary.
Number 9. The lost city of Ubar refers to a fabled story that appears in the Quran, as well as in 1001 Arabian Nights. This city is celebrated as the center of the lucrative frankincense trade for 3,000 years prior to the birth of Christ. This fabled lost city has actually been discovered by a team of both amateur and professional archaeologists based in Los Angeles. With the use of high-tech satellite imagery and old-fashioned detective work, it was found that a fortress city was buried beneath shifting sands in an area known as Oman. This area is so barren that it's referred to as the Empty Quarter. Ubar had been built almost 5,000 years ago and was a processing and shipping center for frankincense. This is an aromatic resin that's said to be used in cremations and ceremonies. It can also be used as a medicine and perfume. During this time, frankincense was as valuable as gold. T.E. Lawrence, or Lawrence of Arabia, referred to the lost city as the Atlantis of the Sands. And just like the actual Atlantis, many people had doubted Ubar's existence. In a news conference that had taken place at the Huntington Library in San Marino, researchers announced that the site was due to be excavated over 2 months, which would reveal an unusual 8-sided building that was most likely as magnificent as the story portrayed. Additionally, the researchers were able to determine what caused the structure to fall and be devoured by the sand. It had been unknowingly built over a limestone cavern, and due to the weight of the city, it collapsed and fell into a large sinkhole, ultimately destroying most of the city and causing the remains to be left abandoned. The team had also found the remains of a Neolithic village, which is thought to date back to around 6000 BC. These discoveries are said to shed some light on the early history of the area that's been shrouded in mythological mystery. Los Angeles lawyer George Hedges, along with filmmaker Nicholas Clapp, had both led this expedition. During the time of Ubar, rainfall had been plentiful, and large water quantities did not only support the entire city, but also the camel caravans. The interest in this city had arisen when Clapp had first read about the city of Ubar in Arabia Felix, written by Bertram Thomas, who had spent years searching for the trade routes of Ubar. Lawrence had also planned an expedition in search of these routes, but unfortunately passed away before achieving his mission. Clapp, though, had some advantages, one of which was NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, which is most famous for its space imagery. He also had the gall to approach professional researchers with the idea of using the imaging capabilities to find the lost city. Clapp was able to convince 2 scientists, Charles Elachi and Ronald Blum, to scan the area with a shuttle radar system that had been flown on the last mission of Challenger. This radar was able to see past the sand and the soil, and could make out subsurface geological patterns. Using such imagery, the researchers were able to determine the trade routes of Ubar that had been packed into the hard surfaces by the passing of thousands of camels. Junctions where these routes would converge or branch appeared to be the locations for the city. Using this newfound information, the team enlisted an archaeologist from Southwest Missouri State University, as well as a British...
Why wait? So question, why we can't use something like that device, that technology or whatever, to try to locate sinkholes? Because that seems to be the problem. Us not being able to determine or catch or know when a sinkhole is going to present itself. So being able to scan subsurface and locate one, bro, that would put us so far ahead of the game. That'd be so next level. That would save so many lives. Like, that's the type of technology we need there.
Explorer who was part of the military. That December, the researchers would begin preliminary excavations of various sites. One of them was an oasis called Shizer. Thomas had stopped at this oasis during his search and made note of a fort there. Residents had told him that a sheik had built the fort 300 years prior. Thomas's studies had supported this information, and so he abandoned the site. Even though this site was a recent build, it was found by the team that the sheik had built the fort on the rubble of Ubar, and limestone blocks from the city had even been used in its construction. Thereafter, the researchers believed that they had discovered the mythological city of Ubar. It was located on a slight rise in the barren section known as the Empty Quarter. The structure is sometimes referred to as the Lost City of Arabia, or the Lost City of Iram. What was thought to be the mysterious disappearance of a whole fabled city turned out to be an intriguing archaeological discovery that certainly changed the history books. The city of Ubar was not lost after all, but rather sunk into the sand as Atlantis sunk into the sea. Number 8. The infamous Watergate Scandal refers to a series of interlocking political scandals that involved the United States President Richard Nixon's administration. It had included a break-in at the DNC, or Democratic National Committee headquarters, that's found within the Watergate complex in Washington, D.C., on the 17th of June, 1972. There had subsequently been a cover-up by the people who had worked for the White House at the time, as well as by Nixon himself. There were 5 burglars present in the ordeal, 4 of whom were CIA agents who were active against Fidel Castro. The 5th had been a security chief of the committee to re-elect the president. Also somewhat involved in the Watergate scandal was an anonymous tipster who was referred to as Deep Throat. This individual was responsible for providing Washington Post reporters Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein with some critical information regarding this scandal. The informant had worked as an anonymous government source who had assisted in taking down Nixon in the scandal. Eventually, in 2005, Deep Throat broke his 30-year silence and was revealed to be former FBI Deputy Director William Mark Felt. This individual revealed that he was the informant that was leaking information to the reporters. Throughout the 1972 election campaign, as well as the time beyond that, Deep Throat had fed the reporters a flow of information that would expose Nixon's knowledge of the Watergate scandal. It was discovered that the idea of breaking into the DNC office to tap the phones had been conceived by Gordon Liddy, part of the council for the Committee for the Re-election of the President. He had taken this idea to the White House counsel John Dean, as well as the Attorney General John Mitchell. They approved this idea, but on a smaller scale. During the break-in, the burglars went undetected, but on the 17th of June, they returned to the scene to fix some wires that they had installed. And this is when they were caught red-handed and subsequently arrested. After these arrests had been made, Liddy and his accomplices had begun to scramble in an attempt to destroy the evidence. They would deny the involvement of the president as well as anyone else in the White House, even though—
You can't tell me stuff like this isn't still going on. You know what I mean? President knows about it. They go off and they do some type of scandal or something like that. And then when they get caught, they try to cover it up or remove it or make it look to where the president knew nothing about it. Plausible deniability. His hands was never on it. This project, he never knew about us giving him the go-ahead. None of that. You can't tell me that type of stuff don't still go on.
There'd been a $25,000 check that was allotted for the Nixon campaign, which had ended up in the account of a real estate firm that had been owned by one of the burglars. During the time of this break-in, Deep Throat had been second in command at the FBI and had been the one in charge of the day-to-day operations. He and his staff began to interview various members of the CRP, but these interviews would also be attended by White House lawyers. Felt further believed that transcriptions of these interviews had been passed to the White House counsel, John Dean, by Patrick Gray, who was an acting FBI director. At this point, Felt had known of Nixon's involvement in the Watergate scandal, but after investigations had been derailed by the uncooperative White House, his connection would still remain a secret. Felt had known that there was a lot more to the story than believed, and had therefore taken it upon himself to release information to Woodward. Both the reporters would then ride this investigation out of the gate. According to the books that had been published, Woodward had spoken with Felt 17 times since June of 1972, until November of 1973. Sometimes these exchanges would happen by phone, but would also occur in person at a parking garage in Roslyn, Virginia. They would generally use clandestine tactics to prevent being discovered. The reporters were not allowed to directly quote Felt, and he would only confirm the existing leads. But as the investigation continued, he would start to offer some new information. In October of the following year, the scandal was linked to Nixon. This came after the FBI was able to determine that the operation had been set up of spying and sabotage that was done by the president's aides in order to support his re-election. Both Woodward and Bernstein would keep the pressure on while the White House had fought back. They would also claim that their ambitious reports had been nothing more than a witch hunt. Nixon was elected by a landslide, and it appeared that the tactics the campaign had used worked. But with Woodward, Bernstein, and Deep Throat at the helm of the investigation of the Watergate scandal, things would only escalate from there. After 30 years of an anonymous tipster, it was finally revealed who had dismantled the Watergate scandal from within. Number 7. Within the
Crooked politics, bro. It's crazy. We still live in the world of crooked politics, man.
third zone, beyond the orbit of Neptune, one can find the Kuiper Belt. The New Horizons mission was to set out to this area and make a flyby past Arikov, which the team had nicknamed Ultima Thule, one of the frigid bodies within the Kuiper Belt. The flyby of the object had occurred at 4 billion miles from Earth. These objects are said to be time capsules of sorts, having been in existence for around 4 billion years unchanged. It was initially believed that Ultima Thule was composed of 2 separate objects that were in close proximity, and had actually been 2 objects that were in direct contact with one another. A New Horizons team member named Mark Bui stated that data that had been collected from the object had given them hints as to how planets may have formed, as well as our cosmic origins. He further suggested that the object is made of 2 distinct lobes that had merged together as one. This may contribute to answering the questions as to the origins of Earth and the life that it possesses. The name Ultima Thule had been used by the Romans and Greeks when referring to a distant place that lurked far beyond the borders of the immediate world. It had been on New Year's Day in 2019 when NASA's New Horizon probe ventured out into the Kuiper Belt. This journey marked the most distant rock to ever be explored by humanity. While engineers began to celebrate once the probe had managed to perform its maneuvers past Ultima Thule, one mystery had remained unanswered for many hours. It was thought that the formation was a binary planet that was made by 2 bodies that were locked in orbit around one another, but the pictures that were snapped by the probe suggested otherwise. NASA had written that the object may have had a shape that's similar to that of a bowling pin that spins end over end. It's believed to be around 20 by 10 miles in size. It was also suggested that the object may still be 2 objects orbiting one another, but it appears that this isn't the case. Another mystery had been solved during this mission, involving Ultima Thule. NASA was able to answer the question as to why the brightness doesn't vary as the object rotates. It's believed that this is due to the spinning motion that it takes. It spins like a propeller, as explained by NASA. Its axis had pointed toward New Horizons, giving the effect of an unvarying brightness. This would explain why images that were taken previously showed the exact mystery. That being said, the team of researchers still has not determined Ultima Thule's rotation period. It's thought that this object formed more than 4 billion years ago, during the beginning of the solar system. This object marks a relic of a bygone age, which may help researchers and scientists unbox the mystery as to how all the planets had come to form.
That's one thing you don't ever think about. when you're studying or looking at space debris. Like even today, when we look at Oumuamua, I never once said to myself, because I'm so fascinated and enamored with it possibly being something alien, like maybe a spacecraft or something like that, right? A ship or maybe their home, something like that. I never stopped to think, well, darn, how long has this thing could possibly been flying through space? You know, could be possibly before the Big Bang, or could it be like, how long has it been going on? You don't know. Like that part I never really thought about.
The New Horizons principal investigator, Alan Stern, had stated that the object was formed within the center of the Kuiper Belt, where temperatures were found to be close to zero. Due to where it had been formed, as well as the fact that the object is not big enough to have a geologic engine such as Pluto or larger planets, it's expected that Ultima Thule is one of the most well-preserved hints of a planetary building block that's ever been explored. This object serves as a valuable window into the early stages of planetary formation, and what the solar system may have looked like more than 4.5 billion years ago. It was on New Year's Day when the probe had reached the closest point of the flyby at 5:33 a.m. British time. It had passed by the object at over 3,000 miles an hour and came within 2,200 miles of the surface of this 19-mile wide formation. A NASA administrator, Jim Bridenstine, had said the following, saying, quote, "Today, New Horizons flew by the most distant object ever visited by a spacecraft and became the first to directly explore an object that holds remnants from the birth of our solar system." A composite of two images that were taken by New Horizons High-Resolution Long-Range Reconnaissance Imager, or LORRI, provided the best indications of the object's size and shape thus far. Another image reveals an artist's impression of the appearance of Ultima Thule based off of this initial image. The artist also shows the direction of the object's axis rotation with the use of arrows. A sequence of 3 images that was received on the 31st of December 2018 was taken by the LORRI at 70 to 85 minutes apart. These images reveal the rotation of Ultima Thule. While not all the mysteries of this formation have been solved, some questions have been answered. Furthermore, it's been revealed that the objects are in contact with one another, which may unlock the understanding of how our planet and solar system was formed all those years ago. Number 6. On the 10th of June in 1991, one of California's most notorious kidnappings had taken place. J.C. Lee Duggard was abducted while she was walking to the bus stop in South Lake Tahoe. She'd been kidnapped by a husband and wife, Philip and Nancy Garrido. She was only 11 years old when she was imprisoned in the home, where she would remain for the next 18 years of her life.
Jeez.
JC had undergone some seriously horrific treatment during her captivity, and had 2 daughters.
Hold up, wait a minute, 18 years? 18 years. Like, it's some psychos out here, man, that would take somebody else's child and hold them captive for 18 years. That's insane.
During this time, the girl was being kept in a ramshackle dungeon in the backyard of the Garrido home in Antioch, California. On the day that she had been kidnapped, JC was approached by a silver car, and shortly after, she was inside of it and heading to her prison house. At the time, her stepfather, Carl Probin, had been riding his bicycle close by. He had seen the kidnapping and tried his best to catch up to the vehicle that had lured the young girl in. This case would go on to haunt the family for the next 20 years. It was discovered that the man who had abducted JC was a convicted felon who'd already spent 11 years in prison. In 1988, he was released on parole. It was during this time in prison that Philip met his wife through a fellow inmate. After his release, the couple had moved to Antioch and Sacramento, where he would go on to build the backyard prison in which JC would be kept. It had only been 3 years since his release when he decided to kidnap the girl. She'd been hidden from plain sight in the backyard, which was a labyrinth. It featured 2 sheds, 2 tents, an outhouse, and a shower. This compound had been concealed so well that during 2 separate police searches in 2006 and 2008, it had been left undiscovered. During JC's captivity, the couple had opened a printing business where one of their clients had been Shavon Molino. He had later stated that the family had been rather unusual. It had been on the 24th of August in 2009 when Philip and JC's 2 daughters would arrive on the campus of UC Berkeley. Here, the felon allegedly inquired about the holding events for a religious organization. He would be told to return the next day by one of the members of staff, Lisa Campbell. Lisa had requested that a background check be done on Philip, where it would be discovered that he was a registered felon. His parole officer was contacted shortly after, and it was found that during his time of parole, Philip had insisted that he had no children. After the officer was informed of the 2 children who were seen with the man, a parole meeting was ordered. Initially, he tried to maintain that the girls had been distant relatives, but had soon begun to crack under pressure. Both Philip and Nancy would be arrested and charged with 29 felonies, which included false imprisonment.
That still ain't enough. 29 just don't seem like enough. She was there 18 years. I need triple digits.
Investigation, the home had been raided, and the silver car that was used in the abduction was found. JC, who was much older by this time, was reunited with her mother in 2009.
Wow.
Fred Collar of the El Dorado County Sheriff's Department had stated that the woman had been in good health, but that living the way she did in the backyard was bound to have taken a toll on her.
Yes.
Philip would go on to be sentenced to 431 years to life in prison.
There we go. I needed triple digits. That's what I needed. I needed triple digits for that, bro. Like, are you serious? You took this girl's whole life away from her. Whole life away from her. She'll never be normal again, be able to go out and do normal things, be amongst people, get to know random people, make friends, nothing like that. She's gonna have trust issues beyond belief. No, I needed triple digits out of him.
June of 2011, and Nancy was given a 36-year to life sentence. She'll be up for parole in 2034. This long nightmare that JC endured had concluded in August of 2009. She had later published a book in 2011 that was titled A Stolen Life, and in 2016 she would publish another that was titled Freedom, My Book of Firsts. She'd featured in some television interviews where she speaks of the healing process that she had to go through.
Whew, I can only imagine.